RWBY, Volume 4, Episode 6, Tipping Point. What happens? We start off with Ren asking RWBY how long she thought this journey would take. RWBY answers 2 weeks as the group stumbles upon an unmarked city in disarray. Ja drops their map again. The gang looks around and discovers the town is called Oniyuri. Ren explains the tragic history of Oniyuri and the group decide to leave. We then cut to Weiss's performance, which goes well despite her unhappy demeanor. We see the fancy after party is going well, and while her dad is talking about boring adult stuff, Weiss goes to look at some art. Weiss gets hit on by a bootleg Neptune, which goes about as well as you would think, until she loses her temper over him not knowing the event was to raise money to help Vale. A bitch insults the tragedy that happens at Beacon, which causes Weiss to snap at her. There's an altercation with Jacques, and Weiss ends up summoning a Borbotusk, which charges the bitch, but is stopped by Ironwood. Ironwood tells the bitch off and leaves. Back with Team Ranger, they still haven't managed to leave the city when Ren senses danger fast approaching. Tyrion appears and an epic fight ensues until they all stop to chat for a moment. Tyrion explains that he's after RWBY and the fight continues. It seems like the heroes have the upper hand until Tyrion reveals his scorpion tail. Things are looking bad until Crow intervenes and the episode ends with the cock tease of the rest of that battle. Man, this show looks its best when the characters get to move around in natural lighting. Everyone tends to feel stuck in one place except for Ranger, and the beautiful lighting effects are at their best when we get to see them walking around in the woods. So, they never say how long the group's been adventuring for. The most we ever get told is a few months, but nothing specific. You'd think the group would have brought this up sooner? Why do you keep dropping your fucking map? Just put it in Ren's backpack or something. Shit! Can Nora always jump like that? Like, she hasn't been struck by lightning, but she's got some mad ups. Also, I like how the group decides to check the open floor 5 feet from each other to determine if they can find someone. Spread out, guys, at least RWBY looked under something. Does RWBY's boob window help in combat? It's just something I noticed. It's like she bought a normal shirt and cut a convenient hole in the front so people could see some cleavage, but she could also still have a high collar. Ren's line of "not just anyone" is the most vague hint at the final boss of the volume that when I first saw this episode, it just confused me. Like, I thought he said something grammatically incorrect. It's fun to know he's thinking about the Nukkalavi during the scene on a rewatch. There's a lot of nice subtle foreshadowing throughout the volume for it too. Good job, RWBY crew. So, Casey's singing is pretty, but it's obviously a different voice from Kara's. Casey's singing voice and Kara's talking voice sound so different that it feels like Weiss is lip-syncing to the song, not actually singing it. Casey also tends to mumble her way through the lines. I had to look up the lyrics since I couldn't understand her. Actual lyrics. I'm not your pawn, not another thing you own. I was not born guilty of your crimes. The riches and your influence can't hold me anymore. I won't be possessed, burdened by your royal test. I will not surrender, this life is mine. What I heard. Unlock your pain, not another thing you own. I was not for guilty of your crimes. Your wretches and your influence can't hold me anymore. I won't be possessed, your final royal test. I will not surrender, this life is mine. It is fun to finally get to see Weiss sing in the show proper. The only time we've seen it before was the White trailer. It took them 3 volumes, 1 whole season, but we finally get to see it. It'd be cool if they could incorporate her singing into the show more. It'd be fun to see her sing casually, rather than at these big concerts exclusively. I fucking hate Jacques and Whitley's smug-ass faces here. Why do they look like that? Yes, we got her to sing a song about being sad. Why does Jacques care so much about Weiss walking away from his conversation? What is he expected to do? Yell at people and attack them with her summoning? Oh wait. But really though, it's odd he wants her close by so bad. Dude, take a hint. She's not into you. You know, I would say Weiss overreacts a little at the guy, but there's seriously a sign right in front of him detailing where the proceeds go. Not only is he a jerk, he's a stupid one too. Kara gives a really good performance here, especially when she tells Henry off. Great job, gold star. In this wide shot, it's real easy to see that every man is wearing the same suit, but in different colors, and there's like 8 ladies in alternate versions of the same dress. At least they do actually have more variety than they did for the dance in Volume 2, so it's not too distracting. Kill the bitch! Do it! Aww. No, but seriously, Ironwood is super cool in the scene, and with him siding with Weiss, it almost makes me certain he's a good guy. Almost. This whole after party is really good, one of the best in the volume. We get to see some development with Weiss, and it's exciting without ever feeling rushed or too slow. How big is Oniyuri? It feels like Ranger should have left the town by now. You know what? Let's talk about some basic pacing and visual techniques used in visual mediums. When we cut away from one scenario to another, and then back to the first, it's understood that time never stopped moving for the first scenario. An example of this happened back in episode 3. We saw some stuff with Blake on the boat, we cut away to Yang, And when we got back to Blake, time had clearly continued moving to the point that the sun was setting. So when we cut away from Ranger to Weiss back to Ranger, it's implied that during that time we spent with Weiss, the group has been walking. But Ranger doesn't seem to have progressed at all. Look, you can even see the opening to the town where they came in from. This isn't the last time we'll see confusing cuts like this, and it's far from the most egregious example in the volume, and we'll be talking about it more when it becomes a bigger issue down the line. However, our team needs to learn how to cut together storylines better if they're going to be splitting our attention so much. As it is now, it feels like they wrote out what happened to Ranger in this episode, and wrote out what happened to Weiss separately, then stuck Weiss's bit in the middle randomly. But, like I said, this is far from the worst case of this in the volume, so we'll talk about it more when we get to it later. I really like how Tyrion just starts attacking, no unnecessary introductory monologue. The fight is super exciting, the choreography has never looked this good before. It's fast-paced but easy to follow. There are some commenters on the RT site saying stuff like, "These fights are shit now that Monty's gone." They are wrong and stupid. Monty was an amazing animator. But he wasn't the only one. If there's one thing you can't complain about this volume, it's the fights. Now if they could just start putting some of that effort into the rest of the show. Of course Jean interests Tyrion. Why wouldn't he? This next part is something I'd like to call, let's go over how often Miles and Carrie write into the script that Jean gets to do something important for the plot while Ruby doesn't get to do anything even though she's the so-called protagonist of the show. TM. What are all the important things Jean's done throughout Ruby? He befriended Ruby and hung out with her. He needed Pyrrha's help with his landing. He got a lecture about auras. Don't forget that he has a lot of it. He became leader of Juniper. There was an entire Jean arc that included getting bullied by Cardan, talking with Pyrrha on the roof, getting blackmailed by Cardan, having an emotional talk with Ruby, getting bullied by Cardan in the Foreverfall forest, fighting and defeating the Ursa, talking to Pyrrha on the roof Part 2. He sang to Weiss to ask her out. He talked with Ren and the others about Weiss. He talked with Pyrrha and Neptune on the balcony. He cross-dressed for Pyrrha. He and the team got a special dance number. He gets a longer scene during the fight at the end of Volume 2. Where almost all other characters simply fought the Grimm, he got to psych himself up, attack, and confidently look at the Ursa before it falls dramatically. He talks with Pyrrha about destiny. He followed Pyrrha below the school. He failed to protect Pyrrha and Amber. He got a kiss from Pyrrha and was blasted away in a locker. He was very upset about Pyrrha. He joined Ruby on her journey to Haven with Ren and Nora. He got extra comedy bits during the fight with the Geist. He got new armor on screen, the others had upgraded before the season started. He trained at night while listening to a video of Pyrrha. He's interesting to Tyrion. That's 29 things. What are all the important things Ruby's done in Ruby? She protected the dust shop from Torchwick and Cinder. She was invited to join Beacon early. She befriended and hung out with Jean. She talked about books with Blake, and the music makes it sound like it's supposed to be real inspiring and shit, but it's not that impressive that she likes to read, lots of people do. She tried to fight the Scorpion on her own, needing to be saved by Weiss. She came up with the plan to defeat the Nevermore and got the final blow on it. She talks to Ozpin about leadership. She has an emotional talk with Jean. She hung out with Penny to discover she's a robot. She helped fight Torchwick and the Paladin with the rest of her team. She discovered Cinder, but failed to stop her. If you replaced Ruby with anyone else in the scene, nothing would have changed. For some reason, Oobleck didn't ask Ruby why she wants to be a huntress like how he did with the rest of the team, and instead he talked to her about Grimm. It's more of an Oobleck scene, really. She fell and got kidnapped while following Zwei. She fought some Grimm, but got no more screen time than anyone else. Team Coffee got the climax of the fight. She has a monologue at her mother's grave. She gets to meet Winter, but it's really more of a Weiss scene. She accidentally found Mercury. She ran from Mercury and cried at Penny's death. She fought Torchwick and Neo and won by luck. She saved the day with her Deus Ex Machina eyes. She was the vehicle used for Crow to explain to the audience about Silver-Eyed Warriors. She left for Haven. She had some nightmares about Pyrrha. She's Tyrion's target. That's 24 things. Most of Ruby's scenes are directly connected to another character, where she's there with a group, or the focus is a different character and she's just along for the ride. She talks to other characters frequently, because she's the excuse for the audience to learn something. Ruby rarely gets to develop herself, as she's mostly used to help other characters grow. Meanwhile, Jean was described in the director's commentary as part of the B characters. So how come this B character gets to do so much when we already have 4 main characters to develop? One can't help but feel Jean gets to do so much because Miles, the lead writer of RWBY, voices him. Who should we have in this scene? Let's use my character! I'm just so tired of Jean getting the spotlight so often when it feels like the main girls never get to do much since they all have to share center stage. And amongst all this, the title character has grown the least so far. Ruby doesn't feel like a protagonist since she hasn't gotten the chance to develop. Ruby is the protagonist not because she's done anything special on her own accord, or has some ultimate goal, or even because she's our main focus, as our attention is split evenly between Team Ruby and Juniper. She's the protagonist because the script says so. It's good to see that Tyrion quickly makes up for his lackluster introduction in the first episode here. Before he was just giggly, but here we get to see that he talks in a flowery way and holds himself confidently when standing. He's almost poetic, but he's still crazy. A gentleman psycho is way more interesting than the boring Betty he seemed to be at first. If he wasn't so scary, he could have filled the hole in my heart left by Torchwick. Having Ruby shoot Nora with lightning is brilliant, but maybe next time she should give her some warning first. It's awfully convenient that Tyrion stopped his murder spree so he could just stand around when Nora attacks, but I'll let it slide since the directing during the scene is just great. Nora being framed by Tyrion's shoulder brings our eyes to her and builds anticipation for her strike. Excellently done. What? Tyrion's got a tail? I never would have guessed since it was set to invisible before now! It's still a cool reveal, it's just dumb that it was spoiled by lazy directing earlier. Josh Grell does an amazing job as Tyrion. I want to listen to him and try to soak in his talent. 11 out of 10. Why don't Ranger attack all together rather than running up one at a time? Oh, that's right. Characters never work together in this series unless they want to reference ship names. Yo, this shot of Crow flying in and transforming into a run is one of the best directed and coolest shots of the show. This thing that happens when Tyrion kicks Ruby. That's her aura breaking. When it happened to Amber, she was unable to continue fighting and was helpless to Cinder's attack. Ruby's aura breaks here and she sits around long enough for Crow to get a dramatic entrance, but in the next episode she's up and fighting again. If you're going to make rules for this universe, then you need to actually follow them. If you intended for Ruby to fight in the next episode, then don't have her aura break here. It's inconsistent and confusing. Wait, I thought she couldn't stand anymore. Now she's running around and fighting again? Sometimes you need to be clever with your excuses for cool shit to happen. This is lazy. So, I get that Ren and Nora are unable to help Ruby in the current position, but we just see Jean's face. He's just standing around, an unknown distance from his friend. Either have Jean be stuck or incapacitated, or have him too far to get to Ruby in time. The shit is inexcusable. I could surmise that Jean panicked and felt like he couldn't save her because he's still broken up about how he couldn't save Pyrrha. But you can't rely on the audience to do that work for you. You're the fucking storyteller. We can only rely on what you show us, and what we're shown is Jean deciding to just let his friend get hurt and kidnapped because the script said so. There's no other excuses shown. Oh my attack has been blocked. I'll just stand here so the hero can have a dramatic moment before the episode ends. We already know Crow's cool, guys. You don't need to keep trying to convince us, okay? And so, that's Tipping Point. I actually had a hard time writing about this episode. It's tough to write about the episodes that are really good, and this one's one of the best this volume. Ignoring the weird lack of progress when we cut back to Ranger, the pacing of this episode is great. It's got tension, action, character development, world building, it's got everything. The writing and performances are standouts here. It's gotta be one of the tightest scripts the show's had so far. Fight scenes are still animated beautifully. Now that the characters can interact with the world, the fights are only getting better. While certain shots are excellently laid out, the directing seems to fall flat, and is the weakest link here. Lazy decisions like having Ranger just stand around close together when checking out Oniyuri, or deciding it'd be too much trouble to come up with an excuse for why Jean won't help Ruby at the end. However, this only seems to be a problem with Ranger, as I can't find anything wrong with Weiss's bit. Which makes it feel like they were directed separately and stapled together, but that's something we'll have to cover later. All in all, it's a great episode, and should be considered the standard the show strives for weekly.